Will Witherington here, pastor of ministries and expansion at Tates Creek Presbyterian Church. I wanted to come and offer some words of encouragement to the men of our church and our broader community. This weekend is what our culture celebrates as Father's Day. And similar to what we did with Mother's Day weekend, we wanted to offer some words of encouragement to men, to those that are fathers, and in a broad sense of what that might mean. This weekend for me personally is always a mixed bag of emotions. You know, first off, I'm a father of 4 of my own children, and I love being a dad. I've also had the privilege of being a father figure in many ways to many people, many young people over the years through my work with the university and within the church. But those visions of fatherhood for me are rooted in pain and difficulty because I've been estranged from my biological father for well over 25 years and long for the day that we might reconnect, but it just hasn't happened. And as the years go by, it seems more hopeless in that sense. But so Father's Day is also a reminder of some of that pain and longing that I have personally of not having a father in the crucial years of my life. And so, but also the reminder that God replaced that situation with some other men that really made an impact. And so some of the things I'm going to offer today are just ways of encouraging men everywhere to be who God called you to be. And so I have basically 4 points that I'm going to make in this video, and I'm going to do it creatively so that you can dream and be creative yourself. But first off is I'll talk about men are strong when they are weak, and you'll hear some of that even as I just said in my story. Secondly is I think men everywhere long for fatherhood, whether that's for themselves or being fathered. Thirdly, men need an adventure, and we'll talk about why that's important. And then fourthly, men should look for a fight. God made us to fight, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But let's I'm going to do this with pictures, and I'm going to do this in a creative way. This first picture that I have here is this is me and my son Andrew when he was very little, and my stepfather-in-law George Thompson. Tragically, George passed away back in February, and I had the privilege of doing his funeral. But I want to talk about fatherhood, manhood, in the context of what's in this picture. Okay, this is 3 generations of men, all very different backgrounds. But we're sitting on top of Mary's Saddle at almost 11,000 feet in the Jedediah Wilderness at the back of the Teton Mountains on the Idaho side. But what this picture shows, as you can see, is we all 3 have hats. We all 3 wear hats. And so I've thought about my life in manhood in the context of some of the hats that I've worn. Proverbially, some of the hats I wear, but literally some of the physical baseball caps that I've worn. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell my story and thoughts about manhood through the lens of the hats that have sat on top of my head over the years. And you can see here in this picture of George, myself, and Andrew, we're all wearing hats. And so men everywhere can relate to this. So the first hat that I have, and I have it right here, and don't judge, but this is my Tennessee hat, and this actually belonged to George. George was a big Tennessee fan. Both of his biological children, Jansen and Vivian, went to Tennessee. So there's actually a scholarship at the University of Tennessee now named after George Cameron Thompson that's geared towards first generation college students from Appalachia that will go. So George made a huge impact. Even now that he's gone to be with the Lord, he's still making an impact. But what I want this hat to represent is what God did by bringing George Thompson into my life was to give me that vision of fatherhood, but also to show me that a man really is strong when he is weak. And George Thompson personified for me this vision of manhood that the scriptures speak about so well. Humility, meekness, patience, wisdom. And so I wear this hat, and you can see here, George and I love to hike together, and he wore this Tennessee hat when he hiked. And so this year I'm wearing a Tennessee hat on all my hikes. And you can see in this picture with my family that I wear this hat in memory of George, but also to remind me of those aspects of fatherhood that George taught me, which is a man is strong when he is weak. It's not macho bravado that makes a man. What makes a man is when he is humble, when he is meek, when he has conviction, when he is wise. And so I wear this Tennessee hat and I yell, "Go Cats," on all the trails that I'm on. But I wear this Tennessee hat in honor of George Thompson and the idea of fatherhood that he brought, because that is what I long for, is to be a father and the father of my own kid, a father to the broader church community, and that sort of thing. So this hat represents that. The second hat that I have here is this San Diego Padres baseball hat. Now this hat was my son's first T-ball hat. And this hat reminds me not only of the fatherhood, that's because I shared so many memories on the baseball field with my son, Andrew, but also in a really cool story. God led our family to meet a young man years ago that played baseball and football at the University of Kentucky, and then was drafted by the San Diego Padres to play baseball. He's now a lawyer in Nashville, but what this hat reminds me of is not only the longing to be a father in a physical sense to my children, but that my role as a man is to bring that masculine fathering nature to the community of God's people everywhere. And so by giving my life away to younger men, to younger women over the years, this hat, when I put it on, represents that idea of fatherhood that I long to have, and that I think men everywhere want to have, is an influence on the next generation, that we're passing down humility, wisdom, faith to the next generation. But also what this hat is, in this next picture, this is me on a Teton, Grand Teton climb. I got on my 40th birthday, friends gave me an expedition to climb Grand Teton. And this is my guide. She was a guide at Mount Everest. And so I learned a lot from her. But I wear this hat in just about all of my adventures that I've had over the last few years. In mountains, fishing, running races that we've done. I've worn this hat. And it reminds me not only of fatherhood, but it also reminds me of the need for adventure. That within every man, there is this, call it adrenaline, call it competition, whatever you want to call it. But there's within us a need to have something adventurous. And I would just encourage you, men, to explore that. It doesn't have to be mountains and something risky like that, but building something, or writing music, or writing poetry, or expressing yourself in some way that's adventurous, that's stepping out in faith, that's taking God at his word and his promises and pressing up against those things that might not be safe. So this hat reminds me of fatherhood, which oftentimes is not safe, right? It's hard work, and the need for adventure. And the third and final hat is this Chicago White Sox hat. And once again, this was a hat that my son's baseball team had. But what this hat reminds me of, there's so much behind this hat that I could explain later in more detail. But this hat it's black. It represents Chicago, and this has become, over the last year for me, the representation of the fights that I want to be a part of as a man. And most recently, and in our culture, is I wore this hat on the morning that I ran 2.23 miles, which was in the broader cultural sense a reminder of Ahmaud Arbery and his death, and the injustices that have been happening to our African American community. And so I wear this black Chicago hat because Chicago, honestly, arguably has been one of the most hotbeds for these injustices in our land, the violence and the racial tension and all. And so I've decided that this year I'm going to wear this hat because all men need to have a fight that they're fighting for. We need to look for a fight. There are plenty of injustices out there. And so where it starts for me is with, this is a picture of my family. You can see I'm wearing the top. This is the top of Stone Mountain where I grew up in Georgia. My family has an adventure every Thanksgiving. We run to the top of Stone Mountain. But in this picture is my kids, three of which are my daughters, and then my wife. And one of the fights that I see is that I want to fight for the women in my life. I want to fight for those that have been treated poorly by men and institutions and society. I'm very passionate because of the women in my life to fight for women. But I'm also passionate for my son to fight for his masculinity, for his freedom to be who God's made him to be. And so starting with my own home, this Chicago White Sox hat reminds me to fight, that I should be looking for a fight for my kids. But then on a broader sense, these pictures of these are my friends that are African-American men that are seeking to raise their families in a godly way, creating a culture that's different, the narratives that are different. And so this hat reminds me of these relationships, both at home and out in our church, in our city, in our world, that men should be fighting for. And so 3 hats, my Tennessee hat, my San Diego Padres hat, my Chicago White Sox hat, all have a sense of meaning for me. And that meaning, just to recap, is that men, you are strong when you are weak, when you allow humility and even the trauma and pain of your own life to inform who you are and shape who you are. Second, we all long for fatherhood. And maybe this weekend is painful for you like it is for me, where you're estranged from your father, or maybe even estranged from one of your sons. Praying for that forgiveness, that reconciliation, that longing for fatherhood, but also for men to give themselves to the next generation. Third is men look for adventure. Explore. What has God called you to? What can you step out and do that might be, quote, risky or maybe not even safe, something like that. But not necessarily that. Something that might explore your gifts, your talent, your creative juices. God has an adventure for you to take. And then fourthly, look for a fight. They're out there. We need to turn our eyes and our ears to the needs of the world, to the injustices of the world, to the struggles of the world. It's easy to stay sort of shelled up in our own little world and our own little culture. But I think one of the things the Bible speaks about for men is that they lead the charge in dealing with the enemies of our world, the darkness of our world. And so go for a fight. The other way I would sum this up is I think about my fatherhood and my manhood in these ways. Fatherhood and multiplication. I want to be a father to many, starting in my own home, but I don't have to have physical children to be a father to many. I can pass that along to the next generation of young men. I want to be a man of faith, courage, and maybe even risk, that I step out and trust God to do things with my life. I encourage men to do that. And then this Micah 6:8, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And I thank God that over the years, he's used the difficult circumstances in my life, the replacement fathers like George Thompson, the multiplication of men and women in my life that I've been a father to, and the adventures of my life to show me that he really does want us to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. And I pray that we're able to do that. And so men, this weekend, as we celebrate fatherhood and Father's Day, we celebrate men of all kinds, that God has given us the privilege of being men and what that means in his kingdom. So hope this weekend is good for you. Praying for you men as you explore being fathers and sons and friends and workers and fighters. But also praying for those of you this might be a very painful time. You lost your father this week, this year, or recently, or have been estranged. Know that I'm praying, and we as a church are praying for you as well in that. Have a great weekend. Blessings to you.